Picture yourself standing at the edge of an endless expanse of sand, where the horizon shimmers in waves of heat, and the sun beats down with relentless intensity. Most would call this place barren, lifeless, a wasteland. But look closer. Listen to the whisper of wind across dunes. Notice the small tracks winding between rocks. This desert, this seemingly impossible landscape, teems with life that has learned not just to survive, but to flourish in conditions that would defeat most living things on Earth. Welcome to Bedtime Biology, where science meets serenity. Each night, we explore the quiet wonders of the natural world, calming your mind and sparking your curiosity. Tonight, we journey into one of Earth's most extreme environments. We'll discover the ingenious strategies that allow plants to store a year's worth of water in their stems, the microscopic organisms that build living carpets across barren soil, and the animals that have transformed the challenges of desert life into opportunities. From the towering saguaro cactus that can weigh several tons when fully hydrated, to the kangaroo rat that never needs to drink liquid water in its entire lifetime, the desert reveals nature's most creative solutions to the problems of heat, drought, and scarcity. So settle in, let your breathing slow, and prepare to see the desert not as a place of absence, but as a masterclass in adaptation, resilience, and the unexpected ways life finds to thrive. What exactly makes a desert a desert? The answer might surprise you. It's not simply about sand dunes stretching to the horizon, though those certainly exist. It's not solely about scorching heat, because some of Earth's coldest places are technically deserts. The defining characteristic of a desert is aridity, a profound scarcity of water. By definition, deserts receive less than 25 centimeters of precipitation each year. That's about 10 inches, roughly the height of a standard sheet of paper, if you stacked 10 of them on top of each other. Some deserts receive far less than this already meager amount. This lack of water creates a cascade of challenges for any organism attempting to make a home here. Water is the medium of life, the substance in which nearly all biological reactions occur. Without it, cells cannot function, nutrients cannot be transported, and temperature cannot be regulated through evaporation. The desert's aridity is not just an inconvenience, it's a fundamental challenge to the very chemistry of existence. But deserts are far from uniform. They come in multiple varieties, each with its own particular set of conditions. Hot deserts, like the Sahara in North Africa, or the Sonoran in the southwestern United States and northwestern Mexico, are what most people envision when they think of desert landscapes. Here, daytime temperatures can soar above 45 degrees Celsius, hot enough to fry an egg on a rock. The ground surface temperature can climb even higher, sometimes exceeding 65 degrees Celsius in exposed areas. These are places where the sun feels like a physical weight pressing down on everything beneath it. Cold deserts present an entirely different set of challenges. The Gobi Desert in Mongolia and China, or the Great Basin Desert in the western United States, experience bitterly cold winters where temperatures plunge far below freezing. These landscapes may be covered in snow for months at a time, yet they're still deserts because the total annual precipitation remains minimal. The water exists, but it's locked away as ice, unavailable to living organisms for much of the year. Coastal deserts, like the Atacama in Chile, exist where cold ocean currents create conditions that prevent rainfall, despite proximity to vast amounts of water. The Atacama is one of the driest places on Earth, with some weather stations having never recorded measurable rainfall in their entire operational history. Semi-arid deserts, sometimes called steppes or grasslands, depending on their vegetation, mark the transition zones between true deserts and more humid regions. These receive slightly more precipitation, perhaps 25 to 50 centimeters annually, just enough to support sparse grasses and scattered shrubs, but not enough for forests to establish themselves. The climate of hot deserts follows a predictable but extreme pattern. Days blaze with intense solar radiation. Without the moderating influence of clouds or humidity, the sun's energy strikes the ground with full force. Surfaces absorb this heat, and ground temperatures climb to levels that would be unbearable for most life forms. But when the sun sets, something remarkable happens. That same lack of clouds and humidity that allowed the day to become so hot now permits heat to escape rapidly into space. Desert nights can be surprisingly cold, sometimes dropping 30 degrees Celsius or more from the daytime high. This dramatic diurnal temperature swing creates unique challenges. Organisms must be able to tolerate not just heat or cold, but the rapid transition between the two. Rainfall in deserts, when it comes, often arrives as brief, intense events. Months or even years may pass with clear skies. Then suddenly, a storm unleashes a downpour. These are not gentle spring rains. Desert storms can drop centimeters of water in minutes, more rain than many temperate regions receive in a month, concentrated into an hour or two. The parched earth, baked hard by months of sun, cannot absorb water quickly. Runoff rushes across the surface, cutting temporary streams through dry washes, sometimes creating flash floods that can be dangerous to anything in their path. Within hours or days, the water vanishes, either evaporating in the intense heat, soaking deep into underground aquifers, or flowing away to distant basins where it pools temporarily before evaporating. This unpredictability is perhaps the desert's greatest challenge. Life here cannot rely on regular rhythms. There's no guarantee that rain will fall in any particular month or season. Plants and animals must be prepared to capitalize on water when it appears, but also to endure extended periods without it. This has driven the evolution of some of nature's most remarkable survival strategies, adaptations so sophisticated and specialized that they inspire engineers and scientists seeking solutions to human challenges. The desert is not a place where life merely clings to existence at the edge of possibility. It is instead a crucible of innovation, where the pressures of extreme conditions have forged organisms with capabilities that seem almost miraculous. In the sections ahead, we'll explore these adaptations in detail, beginning with the plants that form the foundation of desert ecosystems. If you were to design a plant for surviving in the desert, what features would you give it? This question has been answered not by human engineers, but by millions of years of evolution, and the solutions are far more elegant and sophisticated than anything we might imagine from scratch. The first challenge any desert plant faces is water. Not the question of whether water is available, that's settled, it usually isn't, but rather how to find it, capture it, store it, and use it with maximum efficiency. Desert plants have evolved multiple strategies to address each aspect of this challenge. Consider the root system, the hidden half of the plant that determines its survival chances. Some desert plants, like the mesquite tree, send roots probing deep into the earth, sometimes 24 meters or more below the surface. These are not casual explorations, but determined excavations, seeking the water table far beneath the desert floor. The mesquite's roots have been documented reaching depths of 80 feet, though such extreme cases are rare. These deep taproots allow the plant to access water that fell as rain years or even decades ago. Water that has percolated down through soil and rock to collect in underground aquifers. By tapping into these deep reserves, the plant secures a reliable water source that shallow-rooted species cannot reach. But deep roots are not the only solution. Other plants take the opposite approach, spreading extensive networks of shallow roots that radiate outward just beneath the surface. The creosote bush, one of the most successful desert species, can extend roots outward in all directions, creating a zone of influence that may span 15 meters or more in diameter. This shallow root system cannot reach deep water, but it excels at something equally valuable: capturing rain when it falls. When a storm deposits precious water on the desert surface, shallow roots can absorb it immediately before it evaporates or percolates beyond reach. The trade-off is that these plants must endure complete drought when the surface layers dry out. But the strategy works because when rain does come, they can rapidly soak up large quantities. Some species employ both strategies simultaneously. Palo Verde trees have both a deep central taproot and a spreading network of shallow lateral roots, giving them access to multiple water sources. When surface water is available, the shallow roots gather it. When the surface is dry, the deep taproot sustains the tree. This belt and suspenders approach provides insurance against the desert's unpredictability. Once water enters the plant, the next challenge is keeping it there. Desert plants have evolved remarkable water conservation strategies. The most visible is the reduction or elimination of leaves. Leaves are essential for photosynthesis, the process by which plants convert sunlight into chemical energy, but they're also the primary sites of water loss. Every leaf has thousands or millions of tiny pores called stomata, which open to allow carbon dioxide in for photosynthesis, but simultaneously allow water vapor to escape. In humid environments, this water loss, called transpiration, is manageable. In the desert, it's potentially fatal. Many desert plants have reduced their leaves to tiny scales or spines, minimizing surface area and thus reducing water loss. The ocotillo, a distinctive plant of the Sonoran and Chihuahuan deserts, takes this strategy to an extreme. For most of the year, the ocotillo appears dead, nothing but bare, spiny stems reaching toward the sky. But when rain arrives, something magical happens. Within days, sometimes within 48 hours, the entire plant erupts in small green leaves. The ocotillo rapidly photosynthesizes while water is available, building up energy reserves. Then, as the soil dries, the leaves fall away, the plant returning to its dormant, water-conserving state. This strategy, called drought deciduousness, allows the plant to have leaves when it can afford them and shut down when it cannot. Cacti have taken leaf reduction to its logical conclusion, eliminating leaves entirely. Their stems have become green and photosynthetic, taking over the food production role that leaves normally serve. This change brings multiple advantages. Stems, being cylindrical or spherical rather than flat, present less surface area to the sun and air, reducing water loss. They're also better suited for water storage, which we'll explore in a moment. Those familiar spines that make cacti unpleasant to touch are actually highly modified leaves. Though they no longer photosynthesize, they serve multiple functions. Spines provide protection from herbivores, animals that might otherwise consume the water-rich plant tissues. A full-grown saguaro cactus can store over 750 litres of water, making it an attractive target for thirsty desert animals. Spines discourage such predation. They also provide shade, creating a thin layer of still air around the plant's surface that reduces water loss. Some spines even collect dew or fog moisture, channeling tiny droplets down toward the roots. The surfaces of desert plants often bear waxy cuticles, waterproof coatings that seal the outer layers of stems and any leaves present. These cuticles can be remarkably thick compared to plants from moist environments, creating an effective barrier against water vapor diffusion. Some plants supplement or replace waxy coatings with dense coverings of light-colored hairs. These hairs reflect sunlight, keeping the plant cooler, and they create a boundary layer of still, humid air around the plant surface, reducing the vapor pressure gradient that drives transpiration. But physical adaptations are only part of the story. Desert plants have also revolutionized the very biochemistry of photosynthesis itself. Most plants use what's called C3 photosynthesis, a metabolic pathway that works well in temperate conditions, but becomes problematic in hot, dry environments. The issue is timing. C3 plants must open their stomata during the day to let carbon dioxide in for photosynthesis. But this is precisely when temperatures are highest and water loss is most severe. Desert plants have evolved alternative photosynthetic pathways that separate carbon dioxide uptake from the light-dependent reactions of photosynthesis. The most sophisticated is called crassulacean acid metabolism, or CAM photosynthesis, named after the Crassulaceae family of succulents in which it was first discovered. CAM plants open their stomata at night when temperatures are cooler and humidity is higher. They absorb carbon dioxide in darkness and store it in the form of organic acids. During the day, when sunlight is available for photosynthesis, but conditions for water conservation are critical, the stomata remain closed. The plant breaks down the stored acids, releasing carbon dioxide internally for use in photosynthesis. This temporal separation of gas exchange from light reactions is elegant in its efficiency. CAM plants lose about 1/10 as much water per unit of carbon dioxide fixed compared to standard C3 plants. Not all desert plants use CAM. Some employ C4 photosynthesis, another modified pathway that concentrates carbon dioxide internally, allowing more efficient photosynthesis even when stomata are only partially open. C4 plants include many desert grasses and shrubs. While not as water efficient as CAM, C4 photosynthesis still represents a significant improvement over the ancestral C3 pathway in hot, dry conditions. The ability of plants to adjust their metabolic strategies represents a kind of physiological flexibility that borders on the remarkable. Some CAM plants can actually idle their metabolism during extreme drought. When water becomes critically scarce, they close their stomata day and night, essentially shutting down gas exchange entirely. Photosynthesis ceases, but the plant doesn't die. It waits, its living tissues consuming stored energy at the slowest possible rate, in a state resembling suspended animation. When water returns, the plant awakens, resuming normal function as though the months of dormancy were merely a brief pause. These adaptations, from root architecture to biochemical innovations, work together as integrated survival systems. Each plant species has assembled its own unique combination of strategies, creating a diversity of forms and functions that allows different species to coexist by exploiting slightly different niches. Some specialize in deep water, others in surface water. Some prioritize drought resistance, others fast growth during favorable periods. Some can photosynthesize year-round, others grow leaves only when conditions permit. The result is a botanical community far richer and more complex than the barren image that the word desert often conjures. Walk through a healthy desert after a period of good rains, and you'll find a surprising abundance of plant life, each species employing its own particular suite of adaptations to thrive, where casual observation suggests nothing should be able to live at all. Among all desert plants, cacti stand as icons of adaptation to aridity. Their distinctive forms, from towering columns to spherical barrels to sprawling pads, represent solutions to the challenge of surviving on minimal water. And among cacti, few are more emblematic or more impressive than the saguaro, the giant that defines the Sonoran desert landscape. The saguaro cactus, Carnegie gigantea, is the largest cactus species in the United States, commonly reaching heights of 12 meters and occasionally exceeding 15. But height is only part of its impressive stature. A mature saguaro can weigh several tons, and that weight is primarily water. The saguaro is essentially a vertical reservoir, a living water tower designed to capture and store every precious drop that falls from the sky. The structure of a saguaro is a marvel of biological engineering. Its stem is composed of succulent tissue, specialized cells that can expand dramatically when water is available. Running vertically through this succulent tissue are woody ribs, typically between 12 and 30 of them, arranged like the supports of an umbrella. These ribs provide structural strength, allowing the plant to stand upright despite its great height and weight. But they serve another function as well. The tissue between the ribs forms pleats, like the folds of an accordion. When the saguaro absorbs water, these pleats expand outward, allowing the stem to swell and accommodate the increased volume. A fully hydrated saguaro can store more than 750 liters of water, and some particularly large individuals can hold over 3,000 liters, more than 3 metric tons of water. This expansion is not trivial. The surface area of the plant can increase by 25% or more during hydration. The stems visibly plump up, the pleats smoothing somewhat, though never disappearing entirely. This capacity to change shape allows the saguaro to take maximum advantage of rain when it falls. During a significant storm, the plant's extensive but shallow root system, typically radiating outward approximately as far as the cactus is tall, rapidly absorbs water. The roots can take up quantities sufficient to visibly swell the stem within 24 to 48 hours of a major rainfall event. The water stored in the stem sustains the plant through months of drought. As water is used for cellular processes, and some is inevitably lost to transpiration, despite the plant's many water-conserving adaptations, the stem slowly shrinks, the pleats deepening again. The saguaro can survive an entire year or longer on the water stored from a single good rainy season, though it grows more slowly and may not produce flowers or fruit in years when water is especially scarce. The saguaro's life cycle is one of patient accumulation. These plants grow extraordinarily slowly, especially in their early years. A saguaro may take 10 to 15 years to grow just 15 centimeters tall. The youngest saguaros are vulnerable to many threats, from being trampled by animals, to being eaten by rodents or rabbits. Their survival rate in the wild is remarkably low. Most young saguaros that do survive do so because they germinated in the shade of a nurse plant, typically a palo verde tree or desert shrub that provides protection from the intense sun, from frost, and from some predators. The relationship between young saguaros and their nurse plants is one of the desert's quiet partnerships. By age 30, a saguaro might be 1 meter tall. At 50 years, perhaps 2 meters. Growth accelerates somewhat as the plant reaches larger sizes, probably because a bigger stem can store more water, providing resources for faster growth. The iconic arms that make mature saguaros so recognizable typically begin to appear when the plant is between 75 and 100 years old, though some individuals never develop arms at all. The arms form from buds on the main stem and grow upward, eventually developing their own capacity to store water, flower, and fruit. A particularly old saguaro may bear dozens of arms in complex arrangements. These plants are remarkably long-lived. Saguaros commonly reach 150 to 175 years of age, and some individuals may exceed 200 years. The oldest documented saguaros have been aged to approximately 200 to 250 years, though definitive aging of such old plants is difficult. Think about what that longevity means. A saguaro alive today might have begun its life in the late 1700s, before the United States existed as a nation. It has witnessed 2 centuries of climate variations, hundreds of storms, countless seasons of flowering and fruiting, and the entire span of American history since independence. Flowering in saguaros is a carefully timed event. In late spring, typically May and early June, large white flowers appear at the tops of the arms and the main stem. These flowers are substantial, 10 to 12 centimeters across, with numerous petals surrounding a dense cluster of stamens. Each flower opens at night and remains open through the following morning, then wilts and falls away by afternoon. This brief window of availability is not random. The saguaro's primary pollinators are bats, specifically lesser long-nosed bats, which feed on nectar and pollen at night. The bats follow a migratory route that brings them north from Mexico precisely when saguaros are flowering. They visit the white blossoms, which are easily visible in darkness, and produce copious nectar, transferring pollen between plants as they feed. During the day, the same flowers receive visits from bees, particularly native bees, as well as from doves and other birds seeking nectar and pollen. This dual pollination system, nocturnal bats and diurnal insects and birds, ensures high rates of pollination. Within weeks of pollination, the flowers develop into fruits, red, fleshy structures that split open when ripe to reveal bright red pulp, filled with thousands of small black seeds. These fruits are critical food sources for many desert animals. White-winged doves time their breeding season to coincide with saguaro fruit production, and up to 60% of their summer diet may consist of saguaro fruit. Numerous other bird species, mammals from rodents to coyotes, and even ants consume the fruits and disperse the seeds. The saguaro functions as what ecologists call a keystone species, an organism whose presence and activities have disproportionate effects on the ecosystem. The saguaro provides food, but it also provides shelter. Gila woodpeckers and gilded flickers excavate nest cavities in saguaro stems. The cactus responds by forming callus tissue around the cavity, creating a hardened lining called a saguaro boot. These cavities, after the original excavators have moved on, become valuable real estate for other species. Elf owls, tiny raptors no bigger than a sparrow, nest in abandoned woodpecker holes in saguaros. So do flycatchers, purple martins, and other birds. Some mammals also use saguaro cavities for shelter. The relationship is mutualistic in subtle ways. Birds nesting in the cactus eat insects and other small animals that might otherwise damage the plant. But the saguaro is only one member of a diverse cactus family. The Sonoran Desert alone hosts numerous cactus species, each with its own particular form and strategy. The barrel cactus, with its stout, cylindrical shape and prominent ribs, can survive for years on stored water. The organ pipe cactus grows multiple vertical stems from a shared base, like the pipes of its namesake instrument. The hedgehog cactus forms low, mounded clusters. The chain fruit cholla produces dangling strings of fruit that persist for multiple seasons. The prickly pear, with its distinctive pad-like stems, can reproduce both by seeds and by vegetative growth. Individual pads can break off, fall to the ground, root, and establish new plants. Each cactus species has evolved a slightly different solution to the desert's challenges. Barrel cacti lean toward the sun, maximizing photosynthesis while shading part of their own surface to reduce water loss. Chollas have such dense spines that the stems appear fuzzy from a distance, creating a thick, insulating layer of still air. Prickly pears can shut down portions of their pad system during drought, allowing some parts to shrivel while maintaining others, then regenerate the dormant pads when water returns. Cacti originated in the Americas and have radiated into hundreds of species, occupying deserts from Canada to Argentina. Their success is undeniable, but it's not unique. Other plant families have independently evolved succulent, water-storing strategies. Agaves, which are not cacti but rather members of the asparagus family, store water in thick, fleshy leaves rather than stems. The century plant, a type of agave, spends decades growing and storing energy, then produces a single towering flower stalk that may reach 10 meters high before the plant dies. Euphorbs, native to African and Asian deserts, have convergently evolved forms remarkably similar to cacti, with thick, succulent, spiny stems, yet they're genetically unrelated to true cacti. This convergent evolution, the independent development of similar features in unrelated organisms, demonstrates that certain solutions to desert life are so effective that natural selection discovers them repeatedly. The success of cacti and other succulents illustrates a fundamental principle of desert ecology. These plants don't just tolerate aridity, they exploit it. Their water-storing capacity gives them access to a resource that most plants cannot effectively use. When rain falls, they absorb and retain it with high efficiency. Then, during the long dry periods that follow, they draw on these reserves, continuing to photosynthesize and grow, while less adapted plants shut down entirely. This allows them to dominate habitats where other plants cannot compete effectively. Yet, for all their adaptations, cacti face threats. Climate change is altering precipitation patterns, making some deserts even drier, and raising temperatures to levels that may exceed the tolerance of even these remarkably resilient plants. Invasive species, particularly invasive grasses like buffelgrass, compete with cacti for water and create dangerous fire hazards. Desert plants did not evolve with frequent fire, and most cacti cannot survive even relatively cool ground fires that might barely damage the trunk of a forest tree. Conservation efforts to protect saguaros and other signature desert species have become increasingly urgent as these threats intensify. Standing beneath a mature saguaro, perhaps on a spring morning when white flowers crown its arms like a coronet, one cannot help but feel a sense of respect. This plant has survived the desert's trials for over a century. It has found water where water seems absent, stored it against impossible odds, and created from this scarcity an abundance that supports countless other lives. The saguaro is not simply adapted to the desert. It is, in a very real sense, one of the desert's architects, a living pillar that shapes and sustains the community around it. If you were to kneel down in the desert and examine the soil beneath your feet, you might notice something that appears, at first glance, to be merely a dark crust, a slightly rough surface texture, different from the loose sand or dust you expected. Look more closely. This crust is alive. It's a biological soil crust, sometimes called a biocrust or cryptobiotic crust, and it represents one of the most important yet least appreciated components of desert ecosystems. Biological soil crusts are complex communities of organisms living in the uppermost millimeters to centimeters of soil. The primary architects of these crusts are cyanobacteria, ancient microorganisms that photosynthesize like plants, but are actually bacteria. Cyanobacteria are among Earth's oldest life forms, with fossils dating back over 3 billion years. They were responsible for oxygenating our planet's atmosphere, transforming Earth from a world of anaerobic life into one where complex, oxygen-breathing organisms could evolve. Today, in the desert, they continue their patient work of building and sustaining ecosystems. The cyanobacteria that dominate biological soil crusts are filamentous species, meaning they grow as long chains of cells forming thread-like structures. One of the most common and important is Microcoleus vaginatus, found in desert soil crusts worldwide. These filaments grow through and over soil particles, secreting sticky polysaccharides, complex sugars that act as biological glue. As the filaments proliferate, they bind soil particles together, creating a stable surface that resists erosion by wind and water. This stabilization function is critically important. Desert soils, lacking the extensive root systems and organic matter that bind soil in more vegetated regions, are highly vulnerable to erosion. Wind can strip away the fine particles, leaving behind only coarse sand and gravel. Intense desert rainstorms, falling on hard, impermeable soil, generate runoff that can wash away the upper soil layers. Biological crusts prevent both types of erosion. The network of filaments physically holds particles in place, and the rough, textured surface of the crust traps wind-blown soil rather than allowing it to skip along the surface and blow away. But cyanobacteria are only the beginning. A mature biological soil crust contains a diverse assembly of organisms. Green algae, single-celled photosynthetic organisms, colonize the crust alongside cyanobacteria. Fungi thread their hyphae through the soil matrix. Lichens, which are themselves symbiotic partnerships between fungi and algae, or cyanobacteria, establish on the crust surface. In some desert regions, tiny mosses and liverworts, the simplest land plants, form part of the biocrust community. Bacteria beyond. The photosynthetic cyanobacteria inhabit every pore and surface. This assemblage creates what ecologists describe as a biological skin covering the desert floor. The organisms in biological crusts are extremophiles, life forms adapted to extreme conditions. Desert soil surfaces experience temperature fluctuations far greater than the air above them. Surface temperatures can exceed 60 degrees Celsius on summer afternoons, then drop to freezing on winter nights. The organisms must tolerate these swings. They must also cope with desiccation. For months at a time, these microorganisms receive no water. They dry out completely, their cells entering a dormant state in which metabolic activity essentially ceases. Then rain comes, and something remarkable happens. Within minutes of wetting, the crust begins to change. Dried, pale-colored crusts turn dark green or black as the cyanobacteria rehydrate and resume photosynthesis. The transformation is rapid and dramatic. Researchers have documented crusts beginning active photosynthesis within 15 minutes of wetting. This ability to transition almost instantly from dormancy to activity, sometimes called poikilohydry, allows crust organisms to capitalize on brief moisture events. A light rain that lasts only an hour can still provide enough time for significant photosynthetic activity and growth. The ecological functions of biological crusts extend far beyond soil stabilization. These crusts fix nitrogen, converting atmospheric nitrogen gas into forms that plants can use. Only certain organisms can perform nitrogen fixation, and in deserts, where soil nitrogen is often limiting, this function is crucial. Cyanobacteria contain specialized cells called heterocysts that house the enzyme nitrogenase, which catalyzes nitrogen fixation. Some of the fixed nitrogen leaks into the surrounding soil, where it becomes available to plant roots. Studies have measured nitrogen fixation rates in desert crusts, ranging from less than 1 to over 100 kilograms per hectare per year, depending on crust development and moisture availability. Over time, this nitrogen accumulation enriches desert soils, supporting greater plant diversity and productivity. Crusts also affect water infiltration. The influence is complex and depends on crust composition. Smooth cyanobacterial crusts, common in hot deserts, can reduce infiltration. Water tends to run off the slightly hydrophobic surface. But rougher crusts, dominated by lichens and mosses, more common in cooler desert regions, generally increase infiltration. The rough surface creates tiny basins that trap water, and the organic matter in the crust acts somewhat like a sponge. The net effect on hydrology varies by location and crust type, but in general, well-developed crusts help retain more precipitation in the local ecosystem, rather than allowing it to run off quickly. Biological crusts influence plant establishment in nuanced ways. The crust surface can be a barrier to seed germination for some species, but it also provides a more stable seedbed than loose, shifting sand. Certain plants appear to benefit from crusts, others are hindered. Some desert annual wildflowers germinate more successfully in microsites where crusts have been disturbed, allowing their seeds to make direct contact with mineral soil. Perennial shrubs and grasses with larger seeds and more robust seedlings may establish equally well on or off crusts. The relationships between crusts and vascular plants are still being investigated, but it's clear that crusts are integral components of the system, not simply a background feature. The development of a biological crust is a slow process, a successional sequence that can take decades or longer. It begins with the colonization of bare soil by cyanobacteria, often brought in as fragments on wind-blown dust or in animal feces. These pioneer cyanobacteria establish, grow, and begin binding soil particles. Their sheaths, the sticky polysaccharide coatings that surround the filaments, trap additional dust and organic matter. Slowly, a thin crust forms. As the crust develops, it becomes a habitat for other organisms. Free-living algae colonize. Fungi appear, some forming mycorrhizal associations with nearby plant roots, others decomposing organic matter, still others partnering with algae or cyanobacteria to form lichens. These lichens begin as tiny structures, but gradually expand, some forming crusty patches directly on the soil surface, others growing into intricate bushy shapes that can be several centimeters tall. In regions with sufficient moisture, mosses eventually establish. A fully developed crust with layers of cyanobacteria, algae, lichens, and mosses represents decades to over a century of gradual development. This developmental timeline makes biological crusts extremely vulnerable to disturbance. A footstep, an off-road vehicle tire, the hoof of a grazing animal, any compressive force can break the crust, crushing the fragile organisms and disrupting the soil structure they created. Recovery from such disturbance is slow. Research has shown that even in relatively favorable desert areas with occasional moisture, damaged crusts may require 20 to 50 years to regenerate to their previous condition. In harsher, drier deserts, recovery can take over a century. Livestock grazing has been particularly damaging to biological crusts in many desert regions. Cattle, sheep, and goats repeatedly trampling the same areas can destroy crusts across large expanses. In some formerly grazed areas that have been protected for decades, biological crusts are still far less developed than in adjacent ungrazed reference sites. Off-road vehicle recreation poses similar threats. Even a single pass of a motorcycle or ATV can leave visible tracks that persist for years, and repeated use creates braided networks of barren trails. Recognition of the importance of biological crusts has grown significantly in recent decades. Land management agencies now consider crust protection in planning hiking trails, camping areas, and vehicle routes in desert lands. Educational programs encourage visitors to walk on rocks or establish trails rather than stepping on cryptobiotic crusts. The message, "Don't bust the crust," has become a shorthand for desert conservation ethics. Research into biological crusts continues to reveal new complexities. Molecular techniques have shown that crust communities contain far more diversity than visible inspection suggests. A single gram of crust soil can contain dozens or hundreds of bacterial species, most of which have never been cultured or formally described. The genetic and metabolic capabilities of these communities are still being mapped. Some crust organisms produce compounds that absorb UV radiation, protecting them from the intense sunlight. And these compounds are being investigated for potential applications in sun protection products. Other crust microbes produce antibiotics and other bioactive molecules, possibly as competition strategies against other microorganisms. And these are being screened for pharmaceutical potential. Climate change poses risks to biological crusts. Rising temperatures, altered precipitation patterns, and increased frequency of extreme weather events could shift the boundaries where crusts develop or change their composition. Some models predict that areas currently hosting well-developed crusts may become too hot and dry for their persistence, while other regions might become more favorable for crust development. Invasive plants, particularly annual grasses that can outcompete native species, may alter fire regimes in ways that devastate crusts. Desert fires, fueled by invasive grass biomass, can kill crust organisms outright and leave behind conditions less suitable for recolonization. Yet for all these concerns, biological crusts demonstrate remarkable resilience. They have persisted for millions of years, adapting to climatic fluctuations and disturbances. Their capacity to enter dormancy, to revive after long dry periods, and to slowly rebuild after damage speaks to a fundamental toughness. These inconspicuous, easily overlooked communities are among the desert's true survivors, quiet engineers that build the foundation upon which much of the rest of desert life depends. In the harsh crucible of the desert, where water is the ultimate currency of survival, plants have evolved perhaps their most clever strategy, not in their stems or roots or leaves, but in their seeds. A seed is a plant's bet on the future, a package of genetic information and energy reserves wrapped in protective coatings, designed to endure until conditions are right for the next generation. In temperate regions with predictable seasons, seeds germinate according to relatively reliable cues: temperature, day length, seasonal moisture. But in the desert, where rain might fall heavily one year and barely at all for the next 3, where a single storm in summer might be followed by 8 months of drought, simple germination strategies don't work. Desert plants have instead evolved sophisticated mechanisms that allow seeds to make informed decisions about when to germinate. Decisions that can mean the difference between successful reproduction and total loss. The most important of these mechanisms is dormancy, the temporary suspension of germination even when moisture and temperature conditions seem favorable. Dormancy prevents seeds from germinating at the wrong time, wasting the energy and resources invested in them on an attempt that will surely fail. Instead, dormant seeds wait, accumulating information about environmental conditions, only breaking dormancy when the probability of success reaches acceptable levels. Desert plant seeds exhibit several types of dormancy. Physical dormancy involves seed coats so hard and impermeable that water cannot penetrate to the embryo. These seed coats must be weakened, either by physical abrasion as they tumble in seasonal floods, by microbial decomposition over time, or sometimes by passage through an animal's digestive system, where acids and enzymes partially break down the coating. This type of dormancy can keep seeds viable for years, even decades in some species. The strategy is one of spreading risk across time. If conditions are unfavorable this year, perhaps some seeds will germinate next year, or the year after, whenever their coats finally break down sufficiently. Physiological dormancy is more complex and more common in desert plants. The embryo itself is not ready to grow, even if water and temperature are suitable. Often, this involves the presence of chemical inhibitors in the seed tissues, compounds that suppress the metabolic processes needed for germination. These inhibitors must be broken down or leached away before germination can proceed. Rain serves this function beautifully. A light shower, insufficient to support seedling growth, will not leach away the inhibitors. But a substantial rain, the kind that might provide enough soil moisture for seedling establishment, will wash the inhibitors from the seed, breaking dormancy and allowing germination. This creates an elegant failsafe. The seed essentially measures rainfall quantity. If the rain is too light, dormancy remains intact. The seed waits. Only when rainfall crosses a threshold does germination proceed. Different species have different threshold requirements, probably reflecting different drought tolerances in their seedlings. Species with seedlings that can tolerate some dryness might have low thresholds, germinating after modest rains. Species whose seedlings die if moisture runs out might have high thresholds, germinating only after substantial storms. Some desert seeds have another layer of sophistication. They undergo dormancy cycling, changing their dormancy status seasonally, even while buried in the soil. Seeds of certain species are non-dormant during a favorable season for germination, and become dormant during seasons when germination would be suicidal. The dormancy state changes in response to temperature cues sensed through the soil. A seed buried in soil might sense the warm temperatures of summer and enter dormancy, preventing germination if a rare summer thunderstorm deposits rain. Summer rains often evaporate quickly, and summer heat can kill seedlings. That same seed, still buried, might sense the cooler temperatures of autumn and exit dormancy, becoming ready to germinate if winter rains arrive. Winter and spring moisture, evaporating more slowly and associated with generally milder temperatures, provides a more favorable window for seedling establishment. This dormancy cycling demonstrates a remarkable capability. Seeds buried in darkness, insulated by soil, nonetheless track the seasons and adjust their germination readiness accordingly. They do this through temperature sensing and through internal biological clocks, circannual rhythms that persist even in constant conditions. Seeds become, in a sense, small computing devices, integrating environmental information and outputting germination decisions based on sophisticated algorithms evolved over thousands of generations. But not all desert seeds employ dormancy. An alternative strategy is rapid germination. Seeds of some annual wildflowers and grasses lack dormancy mechanisms entirely. When moisture arrives, these seeds germinate almost immediately, within hours or days. This seems risky. What if the moisture is insufficient? The answer is that rapid germination allows the plant to capitalize on any favorable period, however brief. If the moisture is sustained, the plant grows, flowers, and sets seed in record time, sometimes completing its entire life cycle in 4 to 6 weeks. If moisture runs out, the plant dies, but not before at least some seeds are produced. It's a gamble, but one that succeeds often enough to be viable. Rapid germination species often produce enormous numbers of tiny seeds, each containing minimal energy reserves. These seeds are cheap to produce, so the parent plant can make thousands or tens of thousands of them. If even a small percentage succeed in any given year, the strategy works. And in good years, years when abundant moisture coincides with favorable temperatures, these rapid germinators can create the spectacular wildflower displays for which some deserts are famous. The Atacama Desert in Chile, one of Earth's driest places, occasionally explodes in color when a rare strong El Niño brings rain. Seeds that have lain dormant in the soil for 5, 10, or more years suddenly germinate en masse, carpeting the desert in yellows, purples, pinks, and reds. The bloom lasts only a few weeks before the intense heat and drought return. But in that brief window, millions of plants complete their life cycles, replenishing the seed bank for the next event, whenever it may come. The contrast between rapid germination and deep dormancy represents two ends of a spectrum. Many desert plants employ intermediate strategies or combine elements of both. They might have physiological dormancy that can be broken by sufficient rain, but once dormancy is broken, they germinate quickly. Or they might produce a mix of seed types, some dormant and others not, a strategy called bet hedging. If conditions turn out to be good, the non-dormant seeds capitalize on them. If conditions are poor, the dormant seeds remain in the soil, preserving the genetic line for another year. Seed longevity, the length of time seeds remain viable in the soil, varies dramatically among desert species. Some seeds lose viability within a few months if they don't germinate. Others can persist for years or decades. A few species have been documented with seeds remaining viable for over a century. This longevity creates a seed bank, a reservoir of potential plants hidden in the soil, waiting for their moment. After a disturbance like fire or flood that removes existing vegetation, seed banks can allow rapid recolonization as dormant seeds finally find favorable conditions. The mechanics of how seeds sense and respond to environmental cues involves sophisticated molecular machinery. Plant hormones, particularly abscisic acid and gibberellins, play central roles. Abscisic acid, often abbreviated ABA, promotes dormancy and inhibits germination. Gibberellins promote germination and counteract dormancy. The balance between these hormones determines whether a seed remains dormant or begins to grow. Environmental factors like moisture, temperature, and light influence the synthesis and breakdown of these hormones, shifting the balance. When conditions favor germination, ABA levels fall and gibberellin levels rise. The embryo awakens, cells begin dividing, the radicle, the embryonic root, elongates and breaks through the seed coat. Recent research has identified many of the genes and proteins involved in these processes. Transcription factors, proteins that control which genes are active, orchestrate cascades of gene expression changes. Receptors in seed cells sense environmental signals. Enzymes break down storage molecules in the seed, providing energy for growth. The molecular details are complex, but the result is beautifully integrated. Seeds respond to environmental information with precision, making life or death decisions with no nervous system, no brain, just biochemistry shaped by evolution. From a human perspective, understanding desert seed biology has practical applications. Restoration ecologists working to rehabilitate degraded desert lands need to know when and how to plant seeds for maximum success. The timing of seeding, the depth of planting, and pre-treatments to break dormancy can all dramatically affect establishment rates. Conservation efforts for rare desert plants often involve seed banking, collecting and storing seeds as insurance against extinction. Knowing how long seeds remain viable and what conditions they need for storage helps design better conservation protocols. But beyond the practical applications, desert seeds embody a profound lesson about life in extreme environments. They demonstrate that survival is not only about toughness in the present moment, but also about planning for an uncertain future. A seed is a bridge between generations, carrying not just genetic information, but also information about when to use that information. In the desert, where the future is particularly unpredictable, this temporal flexibility, this capacity to wait as long as necessary and then act decisively when opportunity appears, may be the most crucial adaptation of all. Walk through a desert on a summer afternoon, and you might conclude that it's a lifeless place. The ground radiates heat, the air shimmers, nothing moves. But return to that same place at dawn or dusk, or in the dark hours of night, and you'll discover that your earlier impression was entirely wrong. The desert is alive with animals, just not when you first looked. The key to understanding desert animal life is recognizing that for many species, the solution to extreme heat is simple: avoid it. Reptiles, which include lizards and snakes, are particularly well adapted to desert life. and their relationship with temperature is fundamentally different from that of mammals and birds. Reptiles are ectothermic, sometimes called cold-blooded, though that term is misleading. They don't have cold blood. Rather, they don't generate significant body heat through metabolism. Instead, their body temperature is determined largely by their environment. This might seem like a disadvantage, and in cold environments it can be. But in the desert, ectothermy brings enormous benefits. Maintaining a high body temperature through metabolism is energetically expensive. Mammals and birds must constantly burn calories to generate heat, which means they must constantly find and consume food. A small mammal in the desert might need to eat its own body weight in food every few days, just to maintain its metabolism. Reptiles have no such requirement. Their metabolic rates are a fraction of a mammal's. A snake might eat once a week, or even less frequently. A lizard can survive on a small insect meal every few days. This makes reptiles vastly more efficient in energy use, a crucial advantage where food may be scarce. But reptiles still need to regulate their body temperature within certain ranges. Too cold, and their muscles and enzyme systems don't function efficiently. Too hot, and proteins begin to denature. Cells become damaged. The solution is behavioral thermoregulation. Reptiles move between environments of different temperatures, using the physical landscape as a toolkit for temperature control. A desert lizard begins its morning by finding a sunny spot, often a rock that has retained some warmth from the previous day or is beginning to warm in the early sun. The lizard positions its body perpendicular to the sun's rays, maximizing surface area exposed to sunlight. It darkens its color slightly through chromatophores, pigment cells that can expand or contract. The darker coloration increases heat absorption. As the lizard warms, chemical reactions in its muscles and nervous system accelerate. The lizard becomes more alert, more coordinated. Within 30 minutes to an hour, it reaches its preferred body temperature, typically somewhere between 30 and 35 degrees Celsius for many desert species. Now, the lizard becomes active. It hunts for insects, moving across the warming desert with quick dashes between hiding spots. But as the sun climbs and the desert heats, the lizard faces a new challenge. Ground surface temperatures can exceed 60 degrees Celsius by midday, hot enough to cause burns. Air temperatures climb into the 40s. If the lizard remained exposed, it would overheat rapidly. The lizard responds with a suite of behavioral adjustments. It seeks shade, moving under a bush, into a crack in rock, or down a burrow. These refuges are significantly cooler than the exposed surface. Inside a burrow, even 30 centimeters deep, temperatures might be 10 to 15 degrees cooler than the surface, and humidity is higher, reducing water loss. The lizard might emerge briefly to forage, but makes these excursions short, limiting heat gain. Some lizards employ the strategy of thermal shuttling, moving back and forth between cool refuges and warm foraging sites, balancing the need to hunt with the need to avoid overheating. Physical adaptations complement these behaviors. Many desert lizards have long legs that lift their bodies off the scorching ground. Fringe-toed lizards, which inhabit sand dunes, have specialized scales on their toes that act like snowshoes, increasing surface area and allowing them to run across loose sand without sinking. More remarkably, these lizards can dive into sand to escape predators or heat, swimming through the substrate with undulating movements and using their flattened, countersunk jaws to push sand aside while keeping it out of their mouths and nasal passages. Color changes provide additional temperature control. Lizards can lighten their skin in heat, reflecting more sunlight, and darken it in cooler temperatures to absorb more energy. This metachromatism, the ability to change color in response to temperature, is distinct from camouflage color changes, though the same chromatophore cells may serve both functions. Snakes, lacking legs, face particular challenges in temperature regulation. They cannot lift their bodies off hot surfaces, so they must rely even more heavily on behavioral selection of thermal microenvironments. Many desert snakes are nocturnal, avoiding the heat problem entirely by being active only when temperatures are moderate. These snakes hunt at night, using other senses in place of vision. Rattlesnakes possess heat-sensing pit organs, specialized structures on their faces that detect infrared radiation. These pits can sense temperature differences of a fraction of a degree, allowing the snake to form a thermal image of its surroundings. A warm-blooded mouse in the darkness is as visible to a rattlesnake through its pit organs as it would be to a hawk in daylight. Other snakes, active during the day, must carefully manage their exposure. They move rapidly between shaded areas, basking briefly to warm up, then retreating before overheating. The sidewinder rattlesnake has evolved a distinctive mode of locomotion that minimizes contact with hot sand. Rather than sliding its full length across the surface, the sidewinder lifts most of its body off the ground, touching down only at 2 points that push against the sand to propel the snake forward. This sidewinding creates characteristic J-shaped tracks in the sand and significantly reduces heat absorption from the scorching surface. The physiological capacity of desert reptiles to tolerate high body temperatures is itself an adaptation. While most reptiles become impaired at body temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius, desert specialists can tolerate higher temperatures. The desert iguana, for instance, maintains a preferred body temperature of around 44 degrees Celsius, a temperature that would be dangerously high for most other reptiles. This high tolerance allows the desert iguana to remain active during parts of the day when other species must retreat to shelter, giving it access to food and other resources with less competition. Water conservation is as critical for reptiles as temperature management. Reptiles have several advantages here as well. Their skin is covered with scales made of keratin, the same protein that forms human fingernails. This scaly skin is highly resistant to water loss, far more so than the skin of amphibians. Reptiles also excrete nitrogenous waste as uric acid rather than urea or ammonia. Uric acid requires very little water to excrete. It forms a white paste that is eliminated with feces. This allows reptiles to conserve water that mammals must use to dilute urea in urine. Despite these advantages, reptiles still lose water through respiration and defecation, and they need water for cellular functions. Most desert reptiles obtain water from their food. A lizard eating an insect absorbs not only the nutrients, but also the water content of the prey. Snakes consuming rodents obtain significant water from their meals. Some species drink when they encounter standing water, but this is opportunistic rather than essential for many. The seasonal patterns of reptile activity reflect temperature constraints. In the Sonoran Desert, many lizards are active during spring and fall when daytime temperatures are moderate, roughly 25 to 35 degrees Celsius. During winter, when nights freeze and days are cool, reptiles become sluggish and may enter a state of brumation, similar to hibernation, but without the deep metabolic suppression seen in mammals. They retreat to burrows or crevices, where temperatures remain above freezing, and wait for warmer weather. During summer, when days are lethally hot, activity shifts to early morning and late afternoon, and many species become nocturnal or crepuscular, active at dawn and dusk. The remarkable diversity of lizard species in deserts reflects the many ways to exploit thermal and spatial niches. Some species are ground-dwelling, others climb on rocks or vegetation. Some are active in morning, others in afternoon, still others at night. Each species has its own thermal preference and tolerance range, allowing them to partition the environment temporally and spatially. A single desert site might host a dozen lizard species, each active at different times, in different microhabitats, pursuing different prey, all coexisting because their specific requirements and tolerances differ enough to minimize direct competition. Reptiles embody a different approach to life than the one familiar to us as mammals. They don't fight against the desert's heat with metabolically expensive cooling systems. They don't maintain constant body temperatures, regardless of external conditions. Instead, they ride the desert's thermal fluctuations, warming and cooling with the environment, using behavior and physiology to stay within viable ranges. It's a strategy of accommodation rather than resistance, and in the desert, it's extraordinarily successful. When the sun sets and the desert begins to cool, a transformation occurs. The species that dominate the daytime, the lizards basking on rocks, the diurnal birds scanning for insects, retreat to shelter, and from burrows, crevices, and hidden places, a different community emerges. The desert's nocturnal animals take their turn, hunting, foraging, and navigating in darkness. This nightly changing of the guard is not coincidental. It's a sophisticated strategy that allows these animals to exploit the desert's resources while avoiding its most punishing conditions. The primary advantage of nocturnality in hot deserts is thermal. Night air temperatures can be 20 to 30 degrees Celsius cooler than daytime highs. The ground, which might have reached 60 degrees or more during the day, cools to comfortable levels after sunset. For small mammals, whose high surface area to volume ratio makes them prone to rapid temperature changes, avoiding the daytime heat is nearly essential. A tiny rodent exposed to midday desert sun would overheat in minutes. The same animal, active at night, operates in an environment as thermally comfortable as a temperate forest. Temperature avoidance also dramatically reduces water loss. Mammals lose water through several routes: breathing, sweating, or panting for evaporative cooling, urination, and defecation. In high temperatures, evaporative water loss can become extreme. By being active in cool nighttime conditions, nocturnal mammals eliminate much of this loss. They don't need to pant to cool down. They don't lose water through evaporation as rapidly from respiratory surfaces. The kangaroo rat, a small rodent found in North American deserts, exemplifies nocturnal adaptation taken to an extraordinary degree. Kangaroo rats spend their days in burrows sealed off from the outside by soil plugs. Inside these burrows, humidity is higher than outside, and temperatures are cooler and more stable. At night, the kangaroo rat emerges to forage for seeds, which it stuffs into external cheek pouches and carries back to the burrow for storage. What makes kangaroo rats remarkable is their water independence. These animals can live their entire lives without ever drinking liquid water. They meet all their water needs through metabolic water production, the water generated as a byproduct of metabolizing food. When carbohydrates, fats, and proteins are broken down in cellular respiration, one of the products is water. For most animals, this metabolic water is a small component of total water intake. For kangaroo rats, it's everything. The kangaroo rat's physiology is exquisitely adapted to maximize every drop of water. Their kidneys are among the most efficient in the animal kingdom, capable of producing urine 4 to 5 times more concentrated than human urine. This means they lose minimal water through urination. Their feces are dry, nearly desiccated, recovering even more water. Their nasal passages have specialized turbinate bones that act as countercurrent heat exchangers. As the rat breathes out, moisture from the warm, humid air in its lungs condenses on the cooler turbinates, and this moisture is reabsorbed rather than being lost to the environment. The system is so efficient that air exhaled by a kangaroo rat is cooler and drier than the air it inhaled. The kangaroo rat's nocturnal habits support this extreme water conservation. By foraging at night, it encounters cooler temperatures and often higher humidity. The seeds it collects, though dry when gathered, absorb moisture from the humid air inside its burrow, increasing their water content slightly before the rat consumes them. Every adaptation, from behavior to anatomy to physiology, works together to eliminate the need for free water. Other nocturnal rodents are less specialized, but still highly efficient. Pocket mice, grasshopper mice, and various other species forage nocturnally for seeds, insects, and plant material. Many obtain most of their water from food, drinking opportunistically, but not requiring standing water for survival. Among predators, several species have adopted nocturnal hunting. Kit foxes, small members of the canid family, hunt at night for rodents, rabbits, and other prey. Their large ears provide excellent hearing, allowing them to locate prey in darkness by sound. The ears also serve a thermoregulatory function. Their large surface area and rich blood supply allow heat to dissipate, cooling the fox. Kit foxes spend the day underground in burrows, often taking over and modifying those dug by other animals. They're among the few canids to use burrows year-round. Owls are perhaps the most iconic nocturnal predators. Several owl species inhabit deserts, including the elf owl, one of the world's smallest owls, barely the size of a sparrow. Elf owls nest in cavities in saguaro cacti and other structures, emerging at dusk to hunt insects and occasionally small vertebrates. Their flight is nearly silent, an adaptation achieved through specialized feather structures that muffle the sound of air rushing over the wings. This silence allows them to approach prey without warning. The great horned owl, much larger and more powerful, hunts rodents, rabbits, and other birds. Its eyes are enormous, adapted for gathering maximum light in dim conditions. Owl eyes are so large relative to the skull that they cannot move in their sockets. The owl must turn its entire head to shift its gaze, which it can do through an astonishing 270 degrees, thanks to specialized neck vertebrae and vascular structures that prevent blood flow disruption during these extreme rotations. Owls also possess asymmetrical ear openings, one higher on the skull than the other. This asymmetry allows them to locate sound sources in 3 dimensions with extraordinary precision. The owl can hear a mouse rustle in leaf litter, calculate its exact position based on the minute differences in arrival time and intensity of sound at each ear, and strike accurately in complete darkness. Bats, the only truly flying mammals, are predominantly nocturnal, and several species inhabit deserts. Bats use echolocation, emitting high-frequency sound pulses and listening for the echoes that bounce back from objects. The bat's brain processes these echoes to create an acoustic image of its surroundings, accurate enough to detect and catch flying insects in total darkness. The resolution of bat echolocation rivals or exceeds vision for many purposes. A bat can distinguish a mosquito from a gnat based on the echo signature, can avoid tree branches while flying at speed through a forest, and can navigate through complex environments that would be impossible for a human, even with night vision equipment. In desert ecosystems, bats fill crucial roles. Insectivorous bats consume enormous quantities of night-flying insects, providing natural pest control. Nectar-feeding bats pollinate numerous plant species, including saguaro cacti and agaves. The lesser long-nosed bat migrates north from Mexico each spring, following the blooming of various cacti and agaves. These bats possess long tongues with brush-like tips, perfect for lapping nectar from deep flower tubes. As they feed, pollen adheres to their fur and is transferred between plants, ensuring cross-pollination. Scorpions, arachnids that inspire both fear and fascination, are largely nocturnal. They avoid the heat of day in burrows or under rocks, emerging at night to hunt insects and other small prey. Scorpions fluoresce under ultraviolet light, glowing an eerie blue-green. Scientists still debate why they fluoresce, whether it serves a function or is simply a byproduct of compounds in their exoskeleton. Regardless, this property allows researchers and naturalists to find scorpions at night using UV flashlights, revealing their abundance. A nighttime walk through the desert with a UV light can reveal dozens of scorpions scattered across the landscape, usually invisible but suddenly glowing like blue-green lanterns. The scorpion's pincers, or pedipalps, allow it to capture and hold prey, while its venomous tail stinger immobilizes the victim. Scorpion venom varies in potency among species. Most desert scorpions pose little danger to humans. Their stings painful, but not life-threatening. A few species, like the Arizona bark scorpion, possess neurotoxic venom, potent enough to be medically significant. These scorpions use venom primarily for prey capture, not defense, and envenomations of humans usually occur accidentally when someone disturbs the scorpion unknowingly. Snakes, both venomous and non-venomous species, include many nocturnal hunters. Sidewinder rattlesnakes, already mentioned for their locomotion, are active at night during hot summer months. The western diamondback rattlesnake also shifts to nocturnal activity in summer heat. These snakes hunt rodents, using their heat-sensitive pit organs to detect warm-blooded prey. Non-venomous snakes, like the glossy snake, also hunt nocturnally, consuming lizards, small snakes, and occasionally rodents. The collective activity of nocturnal animals creates a nighttime ecosystem as vibrant as the daytime one, just less visible to human observers. Sound becomes more important than sight. The desert night is far from silent. Owls hoot to establish territories. Nightjars call. Coyotes yip and howl. Insects chirp and buzz. The soundscape reveals a community in full activity. For these nocturnal species, the night offers not just cooler temperatures, but also opportunities. Many prey species are most active at night, and nocturnal predators have specialized to exploit this resource. The temporal separation of activity creates niche space, allowing more species to coexist in the same physical space, by using it at different times. A desert site might support both a diurnal hawk and a nocturnal owl, both hunting rodents without competing directly because they hunt at different times. Human activity increasingly disrupts nocturnality through light pollution. Artificial lights attract nocturnal insects, which then become easy prey for predators or die under the lights. Lights can disrupt the activity patterns of animals, suppressing nocturnal behavior or confusing navigation. In areas near cities and roads, the natural darkness essential for nocturnal species is disappearing. This is an emerging conservation concern, one less obvious than habitat destruction, but potentially equally damaging to species whose survival strategies depend on darkness. Yet, in remote deserts, far from human lights, the night remains a domain ruled by species beautifully adapted to it. To witness a desert night is to see an entirely different world from the desert day, one where sound and smell matter more than sight, where the cool darkness provides relief and opportunity, and where a community of specialists thrives in conditions as challenging in their own way as the blazing light of noon. A desert is not simply a collection of individual organisms, each pursuing its own survival. It is an interconnected system, a web of relationships where each species affects and is affected by others. Understanding these relationships reveals the desert not as a barren place, but as a complex functioning ecosystem with its own particular dynamics and dependencies. At the foundation of every ecosystem are the primary producers, organisms that convert inorganic materials into organic compounds through photosynthesis or chemosynthesis. In deserts, primary producers include the obvious candidates: cacti, shrubs, grasses, desert trees, but also the less visible ones, the cyanobacteria in biological soil crusts, algae, and photosynthetic microorganisms. These producers capture solar energy and transform it into chemical energy stored in plant tissues. The amount of primary productivity in deserts, measured as the total biomass produced per area per year, is lower than in more humid ecosystems. Water limitation constrains plant growth, yet desert productivity is far from negligible. In favorable years with good rainfall, desert annuals can produce substantial biomass quickly. Perennial plants, though growing slowly, accumulate biomass over years and decades, creating significant standing stocks of plant material. This plant material becomes food for primary consumers, herbivores. Desert herbivores include insects, particularly grasshoppers, beetles, and caterpillars, which feed on plant leaves, flowers, and seeds. Rodents consume enormous quantities of seeds, forming a crucial link in desert food webs. Larger herbivores like desert bighorn sheep, pronghorn antelope, and jackrabbits browse on shrubs and grasses. Each of these herbivores affects plant communities in different ways. Seed-eating rodents can limit plant reproduction, but they also cache seeds, and forgotten caches sometimes germinate, effectively planting new individuals. Browsing mammals can control shrub density and species composition through selective feeding. Predators occupy the next trophic level, feeding on herbivores and on each other. The desert supports a surprising diversity of predators, given its apparent scarcity. Lizards hunt insects. Snakes hunt rodents and lizards. Coyotes are generalist predators and scavengers, eating everything from insects to large mammals, as well as fruits and plant material when available. Kit foxes specialize more on small mammals. Raptors like hawks and eagles hunt from the air during the day, while owls hunt at night. Each predator species has particular prey preferences and hunting strategies, partitioning the prey resource base. Top predators, those with few or no natural predators of their own, play disproportionately important roles in ecosystem structure. In North American deserts, mountain lions and bobcats are among the top predators, controlling populations of mid-sized mammals. The removal of top predators from an ecosystem can trigger trophic cascades, a series of indirect effects that ripple through the food web. If predators are removed, herbivore populations may increase, leading to overgrazing and changes in plant communities, which then affect insects, soil organisms, and so on. The presence of predators thus indirectly protects plant communities by controlling herbivore numbers. But food webs are not the only important relationships in desert ecosystems. Mutualistic relationships, where both species benefit from interaction, are equally crucial. The relationship between saguaro cacti and their pollinators is mutualistic. The cactus provides nectar and pollen, energy-rich rewards to bats and bees. In return, these animals transfer pollen between plants, enabling sexual reproduction. Without pollinators, saguaros could not produce seeds. Without saguaros and other nectar sources, the pollinators would lack food during critical periods. Many desert plants have mutualistic relationships with mycorrhizal fungi. These fungi colonize plant roots, extending their hyphae through the soil far beyond the reach of the root itself. The fungal hyphae absorb water and nutrients, particularly phosphorus, from soil and transfer these to the plant. In return, the plant provides the fungus with sugars produced through photosynthesis. In nutrient-poor desert soils, mycorrhizal associations can be essential for plant survival and growth. Some desert plants cannot establish at all without their mycorrhizal partners. The nurse-plant relationship, mentioned earlier, where young saguaros establish under the canopy of other plants, is another form of mutualism, or at least commensalism, where one species benefits and the other is unaffected. The nurse plant provides shade, protection from frost, and sometimes improved soil moisture and nutrients. In return, the young cactus, well, initially it provides nothing, but decades later, when the saguaro has grown large and the nurse plant has died, the cactus may serve as a nurse for other species, perpetuating the relationship. Seed dispersal represents another set of mutualisms. Many desert plants produce fruits attractive to animals. The animals eat the fruits, consuming the fleshy parts, but often passing the seeds undigested through their digestive systems. This serves the plant by transporting seeds away from the parent plant, reducing competition and allowing colonization of new areas. The animal benefits from the food. Some desert plants have seeds with hooks or sticky coatings that attach to animal fur, hitchhiking to new locations. Others produce seeds favored by seed-caching rodents, which bury seeds in scattered locations for later consumption. The seeds the rodent forgets become planted in favorable microsites. Competition is another fundamental relationship. Plants compete for water, nutrients, and light. In deserts, water is usually the primary limiting resource. Species with similar root architectures and water use strategies compete most directly. This competition can lead to spatial patterns in vegetation. Desert plants often show regular spacing, called overdispersion, where individuals are more evenly distributed than random chance would predict. This spacing results from competition, each plant's root system creating a zone of water depletion around it that other individuals cannot successfully invade. Animals also compete for food, water, shelter, mates. Competition can be exploitation, where one individual consumes a resource before another can access it, or interference, where one individual actively excludes another from a resource. Territory defense in many animals is a form of interference competition. A male bird defending a territory excludes other males from the food and nest sites within that territory. Parasitism and disease, where one organism benefits at the expense of another, also structure desert communities. Parasitic plants, like desert mistletoe, grow on the branches of shrubs and trees, tapping into the host's vascular system to steal water and nutrients. Heavy mistletoe infestations can weaken or kill host plants. Various parasites and pathogens affect desert animals, influencing population dynamics and individual survival. These multiple relationships, feeding, mutualism, competition, parasitism, interweave into complex networks, change one component, and effects propagate through the system. The introduction of invasive species can disrupt these networks. Bufflegrass, mentioned earlier, outcompetes native plants for water, alters fire regimes, and creates dense monocultures that provide little habitat for native animals. The removal of a keystone species, one whose ecological role is disproportionately large relative to its abundance, can trigger ecosystem collapse or transformation. The desert ecosystem is also connected to broader landscapes. Migratory birds travel between deserts and distant regions, bringing nutrients in their bodies when they arrive, and removing nutrients when they depart. Bats migrating between Mexico and the southwestern United States link ecosystems across hundreds of kilometers. Atmospheric deposition of dust can transport nutrients and microorganisms vast distances, affecting communities far from the source. Human impacts on desert ecosystems are substantial and growing. Urban development fragments habitats, creating barriers to animal movement and altering hydrology. Agriculture draws down groundwater, lowering water tables and drying wells and springs that formerly supported desert wildlife. Off-road vehicle recreation damages biological soil crusts and vegetation. Climate change alters temperature and precipitation patterns, potentially shifting the boundaries of desert regions and changing the composition of desert communities. Invasive species, brought intentionally or accidentally by humans, compete with and sometimes displace native species. Conservation efforts seek to protect desert ecosystems by preserving large intact areas, removing invasive species, restoring degraded habitats, and managing human uses to reduce impacts. Protected areas like national parks and wilderness areas provide refuges for desert species and preserve examples of functioning desert ecosystems for study and appreciation. But deserts face challenges: water demands from growing human populations, conflict with the water needs of desert ecosystems. Climate change projections suggest many desert regions will become hotter and drier, potentially exceeding the tolerance limits of even well-adapted species. Yet deserts have persisted through major climate changes in the past. During the Pleistocene ice ages, when much of North America was covered by glaciers, deserts contracted but survived in refugia, isolated areas where conditions remained suitable. When the glaciers retreated and the climate warmed and dried, deserts expanded again, recolonizing areas from which they had been displaced. This resilience, this capacity to contract and expand with changing conditions, suggests that desert ecosystems while vulnerable to rapid anthropogenic changes, possess inherent flexibility. The study of desert ecology continues to reveal new complexities and to overturn old assumptions. Deserts were once thought to be simple ecosystems, structured primarily by physical factors like temperature and rainfall, with biological interactions playing secondary roles. Modern research shows that biological interactions are critically important. Competition, predation, mutualism all shape desert communities as much as in any other ecosystem. The desert is not a place where life barely survives. It is a place where life thrives, though in ways different from more familiar temperate and tropical environments. To walk through a desert with ecological understanding is to see connections everywhere. The saguaro is not just a plant, but a hub linking pollinators, fruit eaters, cavity nesting birds, decomposers that will eventually consume its dead tissues, and the numerous species that depend on those organisms. The kangaroo rat is not just a seed eater, but a prey species for snakes and owls, a competitor with other seed-eating rodents, a disperser of seeds it caches and forgets, and a vector that may transport fungi and other microorganisms on its fur. The biological soil crust is not just a carpet on the ground, but a nitrogen fixer that enriches soil for plants, a soil stabilizer that prevents erosion, a microhabitat for invertebrates, and a primary producer supporting tiny arthropods that in turn support larger predators. These connections make the desert a system rather than a collection. Protecting any part requires protecting the whole. Preserving a population of a charismatic species like the saguaro requires also preserving its pollinators, its seed dispersers, the soil crusts that stabilize the soil in which it grows, the water cycle that provides it moisture, and the climate patterns that determine whether any of this can continue. As the night deepens and the moon rises over the desert, casting long shadows across the dunes and rocky outcrops, the desert's community continues its ancient routines. Somewhere, a kangaroo rat emerges from its burrow to forage. Somewhere, an owl takes flight, scanning the ground for movement. Somewhere, a cactus flower opens, white petals spreading to attract the night's pollinators. Life persists, not in spite of the desert's harshness, but because of the countless adaptations, the intricate relationships, the evolutionary innovations that have transformed challenge into opportunity. The desert offers us lessons. It demonstrates that scarcity can drive creativity, that life is remarkably resilient and adaptable, that what appears barren may in fact be rich with invisible complexity. It teaches patience, the patience of seeds waiting years for rain, of saguaros growing for a century before flowering, of soil crusts rebuilding over decades. It teaches efficiency, the efficiency of a kangaroo rat extracting every molecule of water from its food, of a cactus storing a year's water in its stem, of a snake eating once a week. Perhaps most importantly, the desert teaches us to look more carefully. The obvious is often misleading. The empty appearance conceals abundance. The still silence hides constant activity. What seems dead is often only dormant, waiting. If we approach the desert with curiosity and patience, if we look beyond first impressions, if we allow ourselves to be surprised, the desert reveals itself as one of Earth's most remarkable ecosystems, a place where life has not merely survived, but has flourished, creating beauty from scarcity and complexity from simplicity. As we conclude our journey through the desert tonight, carry with you this image. Beneath the stars, across a landscape shaped by wind and water and time, countless organisms are pursuing their lives, each one a testament to the power of evolution, the resilience of life, and the endless creativity of nature. The desert is not barren. It is vibrant. It is not lifeless. It is, in its own unique way, one of the most alive places on Earth. Thank you for joining us on this exploration. If these calm reflections have helped you unwind or given you a new appreciation for the desert's hidden wonders, consider liking this video and subscribing to Bedtime Biology for more gentle journeys through the natural world. Share your thoughts about the desert in the comments below and let us know where you'd like to explore next. Until next time, sleep well, dream of distant landscapes, and remember that even in the harshest places, life finds a way.